and there's only about 20% of women overall representing us in government. So that's what Ignite is trying to do. And the fellowship program is a very interesting program because it gives us the opportunity to kind of go above and beyond and help other women to get to that point. And so you can see in the slide the locations where we're going to be this next year. And there's actually some locations that I want to point out to you because they're brand new. So we have in California, we have Fresno. That's never been there before. We also have Madison joining us. We have Birmingham. And we have some of our other usual ones like SoCal, San Antonio, Seattle, Denver, Boston, New York. So definitely if you're from there, apply. And also if you have friends that went to college somewhere else, consider telling them about this program so that they could be a fellow with you. A little bit about how the fellowship program works. So I want to point your attention to something that's really important for all of us that are students or just recently graduated, which is that there is a stipend to it. So that has been really helpful for me because sometimes you need that extra little bit of money just for school or for whatever it is that you're doing, preparing for your next step. So it is a generous stipend. We do have a commitment of 1 year. So this is not the type of fellowship where you can just be in it for a couple of months. No, this is a whole year commitment for the school year. But along the way, it's really difficult for you to even want to leave because you're going through trainings, you're going through different events, you're seeing these women develop, and you want to stay with them throughout the whole thing. So in some of the pictures that you see here, the picture with the Ignite sign was actually from our training, so all of our fellows are there. And then the other picture is from one of our regular events that we have in the local communities where we get together with young women. This was a dinner and politics type of event where we invited different elected women to come and have dinner with young women and talk a little bit about their experiences. In a regular day of a fellow, it's honestly different every single day. Some days it might be on your computer getting people rallied up and excited for what they're doing. Other days, as you can see in the picture up top, it's hosting college councils. So it's getting them ready and giving them that training that they need. The picture in the bottom is talking to electeds. So you can see some of the young women having a deep conversation with somebody that's running currently for county board supervisors. So you get to have that connection right away with them. And as a fellow, you actually get to make that connection first because you're the one bringing that person to the young women. You might also be going to marches. So this year we went to the Women's March, and I actually got interviewed by one of the TV stations that was there that wanted to know a little bit about what Ignite was doing and what our connection was to the Women's March. So that's just a couple of examples, but as you will hear throughout this session, there's a lot of different things that happen on a regular day for a fellow. Passing it on to Gio.
Awesome. Thank you, Delilah. So a big part of the fellows' job is kind of divided in two aspects. So the first is the college chapters, and the second is college councils. So as many of you who may already be a part of a college chapter, it's basically an on-campus network of peers who are connected, just students at a university who are gathering and are part of an Ignite chapter. And as a fellow, I've identified kind of like 3 goals that you focus on throughout your time as a fellow and working with chapters. So if you are either entering a new space or if you are already working with a chapter that already exists, 3 things that you're going to be doing are identifying, assisting, and empowering. So when it comes to identifying, if you're starting a new chapter, what's really important is identifying key stakeholders within the community you're entering. And so for me, this was the first time Ignite was here in San Antonio, so a big part of it, of my first part of the fellowship, was really identifying at different universities the student groups who were interested in empowering women, professors who taught gender studies or politics, students that I reached out to who I thought would be interested. It was identifying those people who you believe would be interested in the organization. And if you're already coming into an existing chapter, it's important to identify either goals or kind of tasks that you kind of need to be addressing in the chapter. So, for example, if you have a chapter that already exists but doesn't have a budget, identifying that, okay, we need to create a budget for the chapter. Or if you have a chapter that does have a budget but doesn't have a strong speakers list, identifying that issue and being able to address it. And so that leads to the next part of the fellowship, which is assisting. And within the college chapter, again, that's broken into two ways. If you already have an existing chapter, it's assisting in ways that they need help. So for a chapter who doesn't have a lot of speakers, being able to identify speakers within the community, elected officials, people who we can bring into the chapter to speak. If it is a new chapter that you're starting, it's assisting in the paperwork, in pitching Ignite to administration, um, in assisting in recruitment. So it really depends on, again, if you have an existing chapter or entering a new space. And finally, the final goal of a fellow with chapters is empowerment. So being able to empower your chapter to be sustainable without you. So once you leave as a fellow, to ensure that the chapters that you've been working with or that you've established are in good condition and are ready to go for the next semester. So that's a little bit about the college chapter aspect of the fellowship. Another very important aspect of the fellowship is college councils. And so college councils are basically a monthly um, event that you host as a fellow in which you bring women from all across your city to be able to connect with each other. And within each intentional gathering, you provide some type of training, some type of networking opportunity. So, for example, bringing in elected officials to come talk to your chapter leaders, being able to host leadership trainings, or being able to host run for office trainings. So it really just depends on what you would like the theme of your college chapter to be. And again, the fellow's goal is ultimately the college chapter is, or the college council is a toolkit for student development. So being able to provide tools that are going to develop your chapter leaders to not only develop themselves, but be able to bring what they learn within the college council to their chapter. Um, Really neat opportunities that we've had within the college councils is bringing in elected officials and actually being able to have lunch with the city councilwomen here in San Antonio. Being able to bring different type of women, whether they were running for judge or running for Senate, whatever it was, we've been able to connect women to eventually get positions on their campaigns or on in their offices. So that's been a pretty cool aspect on the college council. Next is peer leadership.
All right, so one of the most incredible things about the fellowship opportunity is that it also allows you to take leadership in your own community. So as you all know, we'll be working on campuses, and many of you guys might be students yourselves or are in the school community. So this is an opportunity to not only meet a lot of new people, but also lead them in a very empowering way for them as well. And so here it says a little bit about how the mission of Ignite is to help you and other amazing young women become the leaders of tomorrow and today. So this is an opportunity as a fellow to really, whether it's campaigns, engaging people, mobilizing, getting others in your community to get involved, it's an amazing opportunity to take leadership. So I thought I'd take a little bit of a moment to share some advice on how I found it really effective to take peer leadership. The first being take the opportunity to grow your skills and your own knowledge. So always be fearless to ask questions, and if you don't know, if you don't feel like you know what you're doing, it's totally fine. You have your other fellows who can help you along the way. And Sarah, who runs the program, is also very, very helpful, and she's always there for you as well. It takes a lot of trust and learning to delegate tasks to others so you can balance everything, especially if you're still in school. this is my favorite one. So I think I really define leadership as when you can empower others to be leaders themselves. So learning not only to tell other people what to do, but really be able to um, empower others to be leaders and take leadership into their own hands. And that's kind of, getting other people to start chapters or do things on their own campuses. Going through the rest, it's taking risks and holding hands. You're never alone. Be unafraid to ask questions. Mentors, seeking out mentors and people that you can look up to and be inspired by. And you're never alone. That's the final one. Yeah. So moving on. Is someone else taking the next one?
Elizabeth, that's you.
Elizabeth, that's you.
Can't hear her.
Nadia, this slide.
Sorry.
Yeah,
what?
I thought I had supervision and support. Yeah. This is still your slide.
Oh, this one? Okay. So moving on, like this is for claiming your voice in your community, like sort of as Gio talked a little bit about before, like this is an amazing opportunity to really like, this like kind of live the mission to and bring it to life of claiming your political power and participating actively, and learning how to be a leader both on campus, whether on campaign, with policy, or in demonstrations of that sorts. And this is something you also want to encourage others to do for themselves too. So I think for me as a fellow, like I really found my role in trying to just get other people to get involved and feel that their voice matters, and that they can play a part in all of this as well.
Okay, so for supervision and support, so in your oh,
Oh,
the screen just went off. Did that happen to anybody else? I don't know what happened, but I'm adding it again.
Okay, cool.
Okay. Sorry.
Oh, there we go.
It's okay. Oh, back one more. All right. Yep. So for supervision and support, so within your fellowship position, you're independent, you're working by your, but you do have the support of all of the other fellows, in particular the previous fellow. So if you are the person who does get the fellowship, the first thing is to have a meeting with your previous fellow before the fellowship begins. So this is really important because your previous fellow is going to be the person that um, you can really talk to and ask them questions, because they're the person who was in the position before you, working in the same city, and so then meeting with them, talking to them about kind of how the fellowship went, and then also with the second point, reviewing transition documents. So what's happening with each one of the current fellows is that we're creating transition documents that kind of detail information that then needs to be passed on to you for when you begin your fellowship. So a lot of this information may include information about contacting elected officials, or the kind of the phone numbers and the information of girls who are part of your college council and your college chapters, as well as any other information that your fellow had thought was relevant and important to share with you. So then after you've kind of had that meeting with your previous fellow and you kind of review the transition document, then we have the fellows training in September. So this training takes place the kind of mid-September, and it's where all of the new fellows meet together in Oakland, and you spend several days just really getting to know each other, getting to know Ignite, know also the kind of the staff members too as well, the space. But then also your training for the fellowship. So um, you're getting information about such as when to start your college council, any questions that you may have too as well, anything related to kind of like a information that you need in order for you then to be able to start. Because then after you leave the fellows training in September, then when you go back to your home city, then you're then ready to start your program. So then while you're in your city, you'll have weekly check-ins with the fellows manager. And so these are just weekly phone calls that you set at a time that works for the both of you. And you'll just talk about kind of what you've done, what you did that week, um, anything that may have come up that you would like to talk to the fellows manager about, just kind of giving the fellows manager updates about the work that you've been doing. And then also you'll have monthly check-ins with all of the fellows. So then there'll be something that goes out where you'll all be able to find a date and time that works the best for all of you. And that's a really great time to just be able to talk about kind of the experiences that you've been having, if you have any questions or information that you'd like to share. Because really, after the fellows training in September, we all don't you all don't see each other in person until at the end of the fellowship. So we really use those monthly check-ins to really be able to catch up with everyone, and then you'll also have an exchange of phone numbers too, as well as Facebook, social media pages. And then you can also reach out to the other fellows through that too as well. And then the last thing, kind of for supervision and support, is then reviewing the toolkit, handbook, and database material. So when you go to the fellows training in September, you'll get a handbook, a toolkit that has information about um, everything from starting a college chapter to how to contact elected officials to how to create a schedule for your college council to how to sustain college chapters and so on. And so being able to you can then reference that nation when you go back to your home city. And then it's a really great tool that I've used so many times when I've been brainstorming ideas for things or have kind of been organizing my meetings. And then the database materials are you'll all have an email account and you'll have access to a Google Drive that everybody shares. And with that, you'll be able then to kind of see any information that the old fellow or the previous fellow had left for you, but then also have information such as you can use like Google Sheets, for instance, to kind of have all of the names of the women who are part of your college council, so then you're able to keep track of that. Next slide. Okay, so your relationship with the national headquarters. So during your fellowship retreat in September, that's when you meet everyone at night. So then you'll be able to meet the other fellows, the fellows manager, people who are part of the team, as well as the president of Ignite too as well. So kind of during this initial meeting, yeah, you get to find out kind of what everybody's role is. Everybody's very supportive too as well. So if you have any questions for them, they will have access to their emails. You can be able to kind of contact them at any time if you have questions about anything. And then the fellowship, sorry, the headquarters will also reach out to you following fundraisers, media pieces, and social media. So then throughout the year, we'll be doing different fundraisers too as well. And so then you can use your social media account to be able to promote those too as well. Media opportunity to be able to speak to a news outlet or a media outlet in which you'll receive training for at the retreat in September. And so the headquarters would then get in contact with you saying, hey, so and so would like to interview you for something. And then you guys can then correspond about how would you like to go about that. And then social media. So Ignite has their own social media pages, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and I think Snapchat too as well. And so there'll be certain times where there'll be weeks where you can kind of take over those different social media platforms. And again, the headquarters, the national headquarters, will then reach out to you, giving you the information um, that you'll need to be able to go do that. So again, with just like with other fellows, with kind of everybody who's working at the national headquarters, you really only see them at the fellows retreat in September. But know that they're always there for you. If you need any help with anything, they're always there to support you. They're really committed to your success, and yeah, feel free always to reach out to them.
Gio, I hop back on, so I'm just going to roll through this timeline and then get us into the Q&A because we have lots of questions. Hi, everybody. You can't see me because I'm like literally wearing my Warriors outfit because it is the playoffs and I am a huge Dub Nation fan. If you don't follow me on social media already, you can usually find me at a game. So we are so excited to be recruiting for our third cohort of fellows. The fellowship program, if you don't know, is one of my babies in the programmatic world at Ignite. And so I love our fellows. I love the work that we're able to do together. And so in terms of timeline, the application, as you can see in this lovely green banner, is linked right there. So you can submit your application. Many of you have asked, there used to be a different application process, and so I just slimmed it down a whole lot, and so this is the correct one. And for the states that we're currently looking for fellows in, the applications are due May 15th. And we are potentially going to release new cities in the coming week, so please stay tuned. I know some of you are not in our current cities right now, so just stay tuned for that. Between May 21 through June 8th, and it might even be earlier in some cities depending on my own travel schedule, we'll start the interview process, and there's a round of interviews locally, and then also the last set of interviews will be with me. And then our cohort, we hope to announce by the summertime in August, and then the entire cohort travels for the fellowship retreat, which all of our fellows have talked about a little bit. And the dates are set in stone for that for September 10th through the 16th. And then the dates of the fellowship are mid-August through next year, July 2019. So I have gone up to the top part of our questions, and so I'm going to answer some of them and then pass them off to our fellows. The first question is, if you're not from an area, can you still apply for that area? Totally. We have fellows that definitely transition to other cities. Our fellow who currently serves in Seattle used to be from California, and so that's definitely possible. The next question is, if I'm moving to Boston in August and attend grad school, can I still apply for the Boston Fellow position? I think that's similar to Lillian's question, so of course you can still apply. And we'll just have to figure out where to do your interview if you will not be in Boston until August. And then the next question is, Delilah, Gio, and Elizabeth, you guys can answer this. How many hours per week do fellows usually work?
I'll start. It really varies. So there are times where, maybe all I'll do in a week is send a couple of emails and make sure that everybody's on track. And then there's other times where I'm literally like really busy, especially during,
When you're on an overnight trip in Sacramento?
Yeah, so just like last week on Monday and Tuesday, I was out in Sacramento, so that was like literally 24 hours kind of thing, except for when I was sleeping because I was with the young women the entire time. And then when you have your college councils, it's definitely a lot more hours because you got to put in the time for contacting the elected officials, all your other speakers, making sure they arrive, making sure you have food, that type of thing. But there's definitely times where it's a lot slower.
Does anyone have anything to add to that? No.
I would just add that for anyone who is thinking about doing grad school or undergrad or job, it definitely is doable. I would suggest though that if you are going to have like a full-time and Ignite, that it'd probably be a good idea that it be like in a location where there's chapters already started so that you can kind of just keep up with what's going on. Because just speaking out of personal experience, last semester I had time to really focus on Ignite, but then second semester I got a full-time job, so now I'm kind of splitting my time. Um, and so it helped that I had more time last semester to really get all the intros in, to really do some hardcore promotion. But this semester I've noticed that it's more of like keeping up with the chapters and making sure that they have the materials they need, introducing speakers, planning out events, and just doing some follow-up that way. So yeah, that would be my suggestion is if you have a under I mean undergrad is a little more manageable, but like you have a full time where time is kind of like restricted. um I would just ask that you kind of like think about like where your location is.
Yeah, and generally it's like 15 to 20 hours a week. So it's like a part-time gig if you are going to be in school. And we actually super don't recommend full-time gigs. As a starter, we know that some folks need it later on, but it's tricky with a full-time gig. Just to be super blatantly honest. Um, the next question is, was it harder to get electeds or students to attend events, and how did you all address that? Elizabeth, can you actually talk about, because some of student attendance at yours is challenging, but not electeds. I don't think any of you actually have issues with electeds, but Elizabeth, do you want to kick this one off?
I can't hear her. I know.
Oh, there. I can't hear her. Delilah, can you kick this one off then?
Yeah. So I think for me, it depends on the type of the event. So, for example, it was kind of challenging to people to go to get to meet with each other, like the Women's March. But it's not so challenging to get them to go to the College Council, at least in my area. And I think the way that that worked out is by really a lot of emphasis on specific college leaders. So, for example, instead of trying to, like, I do reach out to everybody through an email, but I don't, like, call every single person. Instead, I kind of have, like, one to three designated people at each school that I know I can count on. And I kind of like put a lot of pressure on them to make sure that everybody in their team is responding, because they're a lot closer to them and they get to see them very often, and they often have like weekly meetings with them. So kind of getting out my reminders that way. I think food also helps. So just making sure you always have food available and promoting that to the students. And in terms of the electeds, at least in my part, getting local electeds is not so challenging, but if you want somebody bigger, you definitely have to plan it way ahead of time.
And then Gio, do
you want to add anything, Gio?
Because we started with a small and mighty group in San Antonio, and now you've got like over 30 people. So do you want to talk about what it was like to recruit folks like just across the year?
Yeah, so yeah, like Sarah, you mentioned, I only started with like 4 or 5 people who were really
That is
interested.
okay, everyone. That is okay.
And it's absolutely okay. In my first college council, I only had 4 people attend. And I had like a lot of food, and it was stressful, to be honest. It was a little stressful, and it got my hopes a little down because, you know, you work for a month really hard to get people there, and then they don't show up, and you're just like, what's wrong with me? But what really helped was really doing, first of all, doing very person to person invitation, um, and starting small. So I noticed that in just meeting with people on their college campuses and talking about Ignite, buying them coffee, um, just sending them random job postings, connecting them with an elected, just showing them that I was actively seeking them out, like they were they were much more responsive. Um, and so that definitely helped, is being just really proactive. And second of all, like when you're proactive, don't take it personal if people don't reach out to you, if they don't text you back, if they say they'll be there and they aren't. Um, I try and put myself in their position, and I mean, if I was approached by something brand new, I might be a little hesitant. So once I got myself in that mentality, I stopped taking things very personal, and like, weeks in advance of my college councils, I was sending text messages and emails and Facebooks and posting and tagging people in my posts and then texting them again and sometimes even calling. So it's just, yeah, being very proactive, and then don't be afraid of not being responded to, because eventually once you get people interested or once you show them the benefits, you'll definitely have a good crowd.
And then, Gio, you had a very specific question for Maddie about how did you find groups? Did you use Facebook? Did you make cold calls to them?
Is it like student groups? Probably, right?
Yeah, I think this
Okay.
was part of from your what do
The
you call this?
college
Your college
chapter.
chapter
Okay.
slide.
Okay, yeah. So the perfect way, so being that I came to St. Mary's here in San Antonio, I kind of had an idea from certain universities like who to reach out to. But what really helps is setting up a meeting with the student development office at the universities, and number one, asking them what their process is for bringing in a new chapter, and number two, asking them if they could suggest any student groups I should reach out to. Now, universities, it might depend on if they want to give you that information. So I did have some universities that, that would give me emails of student organizations, and so I reached out that way. But then there was also universities that I literally had to go onto their website and go to their student development office and then look up student groups that way, and then just make a big list of people that I needed to email out to. And then, of course, Facebook is huge. So, again, off of that list that I would create from the student groups that I would search, I would reach out through Facebook. If I found out that I had a common friend, I would reach out to that friend. So yeah, those are two main ways. Well, three. So reaching out to student development offices, asking them in person directly to give you kind of like what they need. Um, Asking for emails if they can possibly give those to you, and if they can't, the university's website is always really helpful in giving you information on what student groups are out there, and how you can get in contact with them.
Awesome. Thank you, Gio. The next question is, if I'm not selected as a fellow, is it possible to get involved with a chapter that's already established? Totally, of course. You're welcome to join them now if you'd like to. And we have a list of all of our college chapters on our website, so please feel free to check that out. Our next question is, have you had any trouble maintaining non or slash bipartisanship? Who would like to tackle that one?
I can take that one. I think being from California, it's definitely an issue, especially when we go up to Northern California. Like I just had somebody kind of talk to me about the fact that like it doesn't seem too bipartisan, and so we had to have that conversation again of just kind of coming back and realizing the fact that this is not about one party winning over the other. If you really look at it, there's a lack of women in both parties, so we really need both Democrats and Republican conservatives and liberals. Or I think for my part, like I I have like my own views and my own thoughts. And so there's times where like I have to kind of take a step back and not be so open about them, just because I know that like it might be difficult for people to not feel like it's okay to just be all liberal, or mostly in California it's like all liberal. But just kind of pushing it back and reminding them like, hey, if there is Republican women that want to be a part of this, we're more than open to having them and welcoming them and wanting them to be a part of this and bring other Republican women too.
And I think the big piece about that is like we want to see a ballot that is like up and down women from across the aisle and the messaging, and of course this is all like this is our messaging, but in the truth of the reality is like I still remember the 2016 election, and we had, you know, folks that were in everybody's camp. And so I think as roles of fellows, the big piece there is like, how do you create an environment that still promotes dialogue, and how do you still build that into your programming? Because that's the biggest piece. Is I actually don't want to know what someone's political affiliation is. I just want them to like consider running for office one day, or tomorrow, whatever, however fast that goes for them. Next question, how do you contact city council members to invite them to trainings? Who would like to take that one? Thank you.
For
Jan.
me, it's become best friends with their secretaries. Like, so city council members and even state representatives, House of Reps, they're all pretty busy, so direct email really doesn't work out. What really helped out for me was, again, going to like the San Antonio City Council website, finding the email and phone number of their executive assistant, emailing them, and then following up with a call. And so, I mean, there were some secretaries that got back to me like within a few days of emailing, some within the same day. Um, so yeah, that's what helped me in San Antonio is looking for their numbers online, and then reaching out to them not only through email but also through phone number because they do get pretty busy with email. So it's always good to follow up with a call, and just make sure that your email went through and you wanted to follow up and see if you could provide any more info.
Another thing that I would add is using the Ignite events to your advantage. So it could be either an event that's actually hosted by Ignite, or it could be an event that Ignite is invited to. So one of the things that I did in the Inland Empire, we didn't have too many connections, is we went to conferences to table, and at those conferences there were sometimes elected officials there. So not only would I make sure to take the photo op with the elected official, but also catch whoever their staff person is that's with them, because they always take somebody with them, and make that connection with them there at that moment to kind of just say, hey, this is what we're doing. And if it's a female elected, they're really excited to see that other women are wanting to run. And so that like in itself tends to pump them up to kind of just be interested in what Ignite is doing.
Yeah, and to like really emphasize on that, something that I did here in San Antonio is the first few weeks that I was here, I actually scheduled meetings with all the female city council women, and like was actually able to like sit down and talk to them about Ignite. And so that helped at the beginning because if I were out at a community event and I saw them and I was wearing my Ignite shirt, I'd be like, "Oh, hey, remember me? It's Ignite." And then by the end of it, like now they recognize me and they'll call me when they have like a position come up and they'll be like, hey, do you know if any Ignite women are interested to apply? And so that's been helpful also, getting that introduction early on.
Something I just wanted to add quickly also is that, sorry about that before, my screen totally froze, but make sure that you have a backup plan when it comes to contacting elected officials. Sometimes if you focus on one elected official and then they might cancel at the last minute. So make sure, that you're able then to contact another one too as well, asking them to either participate, or maybe you might even contact two and see which one gets first and kind of decide from there who might be able to come to your first, like let's say college council meeting, and then maybe the other elected official can come to the other one. So, but definitely have a backup plan because they might cancel at the last minute too, or they might not be available.
Yeah, or crazy things happen like here in San Francisco, like our mayor died, and so all of the electives were at the funeral. And so you don't have an event. We were supposed to like go to like City Hall that day, so it's make sure you always have a backup and be okay with the quick transition. So Genesis from Atlanta wants to know what's the challenge that fellows have the most when they're starting their fellowship. We have lots of challenges. Lots and lots of challenges. Where do we want to start, ladies?
Well, I think the first challenge that you probably will face is this feeling of, will I be able to pull it off? Because you start thinking of, okay, I have to get all these students there, I have to get food, I have to get electives, I have to get a space. And if you've never done something like that before, it starts to feel a little bit overwhelming. And even if you have planned other events, you're still kind of feeling like, oh my gosh, like, will this work out? So I think the first thing is just kind of like getting out of your comfort zone and realizing that, if you put all the effort into it, something will work out. And like Sarah was saying, even if it's not exactly what you plan to work out, it tends to be that it ends up being something that's good. Even if it's 4 people, even if it's 10 people, it doesn't matter because you make it what it's worth to be there. And if it's 4 people and you give them the time of their lives and they get really inspired about running for office, then that was totally worth it. And then after the first time that you do your college council, you feel a lot more comfortable realizing that it's a possibility to even get an elected to show up somewhere where you invited them.
Yeah, I'll say with me, during my first college council meeting, um, I had everything set and everyone canceled on me on the last minute. And it was really heartbreaking because I thought I did something wrong. And I remember Sarah texting me. And she was like, "How's it going?" And I'm like, "I don't even know what to say to her." Because you spend, like Gio had said, you spend an entire month like planning for this. You get the food ready and all that kind of stuff to then have people. And it was like legitimate things. I mean, some of them got sick, some of them another event had come up to as well. But don't be discouraged by it. Afterwards, I just emailed all of them information. Um, and so, another thing I would also say about me personally is that I'm more of a one-on-one person, so it's a little bit different for me to have to lead a group of people. But kind of you can make your college council style be what you want it to be. So you're the one that's leading this. So how it is that you want to be able to connect with the girls, whether it is that you want to have something beforehand where you guys like go to like a coffee shop or something like that. You know what I mean? Kind of finding ways that, are comfortable for you as well. But definitely don't get discouraged by if people don't return your calls or if people don't come to your first college council meeting like that. That's, yeah, definitely happened to me. And if anything, it actually gave me the confidence in a weird way because I was like, well, that's the worst that could happen, you know?
It
To then
only
kind of
get
just be
better
like,
from here.
right, it only gets better than here. That was my mentality, and so yeah, that's
And
definitely
it did.
yes, for sure.
So yeah, just to add on to that, I definitely felt like that. Like I said again, well, 4 people, and then one had to leave by lunch, so it was like 3 people, and I was counting myself in there. Um, but yeah, Sarah, I did count myself when I gave you the first number because I was like, I don't want to make
Oh, I
this sound
saw
awful to
that.
Sarah.
It was pretty obvious in the photo, but it's okay.
Yeah. Anyway, what I would say is that, along with not being discouraged and with coming in excited and ready, um, definitely come in with some tangible goals in mind. For me, it was really easy to overwhelm myself at first because I was like, okay, I need to start chapters in all the universities and colleges in San Antonio. Like, it's like 20 that I need to start. Um, and then, like, I soon realized after that first college council is that I had spread myself way too thin. And if I had focused on strategically looking at, okay, let's choose this university and this one because they're all kind of spread out and there's other universities around them and we can go from there. And so when I started doing some goal setting, after that first college council, I said, okay, then this on 3 universities here in town: St. Mary's, Our Lady of the Lake, and UIW. And sure enough, within the next semester, this January, I was able to get those 3 chapters established. And so the next step is, okay, we've got them established. Now, how do we make them sustainable? So for me, that was probably like the most helpful and the most eye-opening thing about all of this is when you're sitting in a room and you have a lot of food and you have 3 other people around you. It's, what are ways in which we can strategically go from here? And let me tell you, those 3 people that showed up that day, they have not missed a college council, and I really thank them because, like, they were really like they sat through that whole day, and they have been there ever since. One of them has now established a chapter at the largest university here in San Antonio, Kaylee, and so I'm really proud of her because, like, she was there with me from the beginning, and now she's, starting her own thing. So,
Did she apply for a Young Women Run scholarship? I know this isn't appropriate to ask right now, but I'm so
I don't
curious.
know.
I hope so.
I hope so too.
Kaylee's coming to DC with us.
Shout out to Kaylee.
I know, Kaylee. Any other challenges? I know that we could probably talk about challenges for an entire hour. Any other key ones that we want to talk about for our new states? Or, I mean, Elizabeth and Delilah inherited what I started in California, so not to say that that was utterly beautiful, but does anybody have anything that they want to talk about in terms of like starting new versus inheriting someone else's work? Elizabeth, are you raising your hand?
So I'll talk. Yeah, sorry, because my mic, I think it's still a little bit weird, but I'll try to talk as clearly as I can. Yeah, so mine was interesting because my previous fellow, her name was Kayla, did an amazing work, but it seemed like when I came, people weren't necessarily interested in being part of it anymore. So I like literally got emails by people who were like, "Can you stop emailing me?" And I would be like, "Oh, I'll remove you from the list," you know? Again, not trying to like take it personally. Actually had a meeting then with Kayla, so being able to meet with your previous fellows is a good thing. And we kind of talked about it, and she just was like, no, like, let's see what we can do in order to kind of create either a new group or to kind of get some of those, um, to kind of convince some of those young women to come back aboard. And so what I did was I actually began creating partnerships with local organizations here in the Twin Cities area. And from there, I was then able to kind of bring some of the people she had already engaged before, and then kind of bring in new people as well. So it was almost like starting kind of, from a new place, kind of halfway in, and kind of having to take the time to sit down and to be like, okay, how do I plan this? How do I want to do this going forward? And I think that it was actually it was a great experience for me to actually be able to do that because um, when I actually did make those connections with those local organizations, it completely changed, I think, the trajectory of the program here in Minnesota and just what we'll be able to continue to do in the future. So.
Thank you, Elizabeth. Are we ready to transition to the next set of questions? Okay, cool. So these next 2 questions are about interviews. Our interviews actually start in May, and so if you are going to leave the country before May, you should shoot me an email to let me know that. But I also just want to clarify that if you applied for the fellowship, it doesn't necessarily mean that we're granting you an interview automatically. We are gonna take a look at all of these scholarship applications. Sorry, I've been reading a lot of scholarship applications today. We're gonna take a look at all of these fellowship applications on the week after May 15th, and then then we will move people through. And so as soon as we know if you make it to that next round, then please let me know what your interview schedule looks like. And then the next question around from Hannah about interviewing, there will be an interview in person. It depends what city and state you're in. So if I'm trying to figure out how to get to Alabama this year, and so that might be the place where I might not be able to interview automatically in person, but plan on knowing that there's either going to be an online component to your interview and an in-person component to the interview. Okay. So we have 4 minutes, so I just want to time check with everybody. We still have like a good chunk of questions. Can folks stay on for 10 additional minutes, or do we need to stop right at 6? Oh, I can't hear you.
Are you checking with us or the attendees?
No, I'm checking in with you.
I can stay a little while longer, like maybe another like five minutes.
Okay, let's go 5 minutes over if you can, and then I have a plan for how to answer these questions that I'm texting the fellows. So we will get all of the answers to all of your questions. Maddie asked, are most of the schools you work with close by, or do you have to travel around the state to work with your chapters? This is actually an excellent question for all of you. Who wants to take this one?
For me, I set my goals and I'm focusing on San Antonio because it's a pretty big city. But I have had some interest from a couple of cities right outside of San Antonio. So something I'm going to be working with the next fellow with is how can we reach out to these couple of other universities just outside of San Antonio. And I mean, I would really like to see us reach further south here in Texas. But for now, I'm personally focusing on San Antonio because it's a big city. And then slowly but surely, like going out to like little cities outside of San Antonio.
I have to drive a little bit because I have Southern California versus just a city. So for mine, I'm located about maybe because of traffic in Southern California, it takes me about an hour and a half to get to some of my college some of my college chapters. And then I have some that are pretty far south. So that would probably take me about an hour from the location that I'm in. I don't think anything has taken me more than like 2 hours to get around.
Yeah, so for Minnesota, I'm kind of lucky in a sense that a majority of our colleges are located in the Twin Cities area. So what that means is it's St. Paul and Minneapolis, and they're right next to each other. And all colleges are within like 12 to 15 minutes away from each other too as well. And so I pretty much just stay in the city, but I have gotten interest from people who are kind of up north. So that's about 2 to 4 hours away from where I am. I have thought about some things in order to be able to reach out to some of the young women who are part of, we say, Greater Minnesota that are interested. But for the most part, I stay in the Twin Cities area, in the city area, and kind of pretty lucky to be able to just kind of go back and forth between St. Paul and Minneapolis to meet with people.
Awesome. Thank you. Our last question, which I'm so happy we actually got to our last question, is how, as far as using the language around woman, how are we being inclusive of queer women? And we actually have a pretty like loose definition of what a woman identifies as, and really work hard to develop strategies to share that we work with folks that are also gender fluid, and just have a pretty large umbrella on that. Some of our college leaders even use an X instead of an A or an E when they say women, and have a I think, operate in a very huge lens around intersectionality and truly recognize that there's a lot of pieces that make us who we are, and we strive really hard in developing what our authentic styles of leadership can and should be, and really support each other in that mind frame. And that's truly how our curriculum is built and how we train our fellows to then execute those different pieces across the country. Do you guys have anything to add to that?
Yeah, so just to add something that I always do, and it's done in a lot of spaces that I'm in also, is that we say our name, our pronouns, and then maybe like a random fact about ourselves or something when we're doing introductions. And so I'm very big on kind of when we do those introductions to kind of have people be able to express themselves the way in which they want to, and making sure that we're also all respecting um, that too as well, and making sure that that we're just really being inclusive of everyone as well. So, but yeah, definitely big on making sure that when I'm in a group of women that I'm meeting, that we always do name, pronouns, and anything else that people would like us to talk about as well.
Delilah or Gio, did you have anything else to add?
No,
No?
I've been doing the same thing, and then also younger women. I kind of got that question a little bit from non-traditional students, so now I just say individuals or students who are interested, because like one of our most dedicated members are here in San Antonio. Some are moms, full-time student or full-time and working. So yeah, students and individuals is what I've been doing just to include everyone.
Awesome. All right, everybody. So I just slapped up our timeline as just a final reminder that apps are due on May 15th. Each of our fellows are available to you via email or in person if you live in their community. They'll set up coffee chats with you, and answer any other additional questions you might have. So please feel free to reach out to them. But thank you so much for joining us this evening. Thank you, ladies. Oh, is it frozen?
Thank you all for coming.
Oh, okay. Okay, thank you. I'm going to end it, guys, okay? Bye.
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 Thank you. Oh, or maybe I'm frozen.
No, you're fine.